My name is Chris Matlon. I asked the last session if they'd seen my resume or my biography, and they had not. So let me just tell you that I was a career banker, mostly on the international side. I spent over 20 years overseas with the Chase Manhattan Bank, which is now part of JP Morgan Chase. I lived in 7 different countries and held sort of general management roles for whatever Chase Manhattan's activities. Come on in. Whatever the activities of Chase Manhattan Bank were in that given country, I managed the overall activities in each of those countries. So what I'm going to do today is give you 5 or 6 vignettes of real life situations that I faced as a business person dealing overseas. Now, we have a standard of behavior and ethics and principles in this country, which I think are instinctive to most everyone, but you'll be going through many of them and applying them into business cases. When you're operating overseas, there are a lot of gray areas, murkiness about what are acceptable business standards and behavior and what is not. But I must tell you, representing an American corporation and as an American, we tried to hold to the highest standards because that's, I think, what we expect of ourselves, and that's what our corporations and shareholders expected, and that's certainly what the world expects, okay, coming from this country. Now, there are going to be some gray areas, and I'm going to touch on those as I go through the real live situations of what occurred. Now, let me ask a couple questions first. How do you get your news, and what do you read in terms of global business, what's happening in the world, finance, banking, whatever? What do you read? I just want to know what you...
Newspaper.
Yeah, but which ones?
Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal?
Fox News.
Fox?
BBC.
The BBC?
Business Week.
Business Week?
NPR.
NPR? Anybody read The Economist?
Okay.
All right, Economist. Okay, good. All right, fine. All right, I just wanted to see what your touchstones are in the world today. Okay, so let's get into this. Okay, first vignette. Okay, I'm probably 30, 31 years old. I'm in Beirut. Okay, I'm managing Chase's operations in Beirut, and a civil war takes place. Starts in 1975. Okay? It got to a point where we lost one of our employees. He was Lebanese. He was in our internal audit team. He was Christian. He was trying to go home up into the mountains outside Beirut. We don't know exactly what happened. An incident occurred at a roadblock. We know it was a Palestinian roadblock. Did he try to run through the roadblock? Did he have a weapon on him? Or what occurred? We don't know, but we lost an employee. That gets back to headquarters in New York. I have 150 employees, 145 are Lebanese, and there are 5 Americans. About a week later, after this incident, I get through DHL or whatever was existing back in the, probably DHL was really about the only one in the Middle East at that time. I get a box. And in that box are 5 bulletproof vests. Okay, 5 bulletproof vests. 5 Americans, and guess who those bulletproof vests are for? They're for the Americans. What goes through your mind? What should be going through your mind at that point? Also, I want to just say, I got these raffle tickets. So, okay. What's going through your mind, okay, as a business person?
Obviously, you're debating who, like, why they only set 5 and who's going to get those lines. But I think you're also debating who needs them more than the other employees. The high executives get them, or is it the lower guys who are in the most danger?
Yeah, that's one of them, but there's something even more basic than that. Go.
I was going to say, what do you do about the other people, all the other workers? I mean, do you go out of your way to go get them some, or do you care for your workers in that sense? Or?
Okay, good, very good point.
What kind of examples is set if all 5 Americans wear bulletproof vests and then the 145 Lebanese don't get any sort of protection?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What kind of company am I working for that only says 5?
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing I think of is what I was doing there conducting business if I need to be wearing bulletproof vests.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I should say that I evacuated 9 times out of Beirut, and we'd always make runs to the airport. And maybe they thought, okay, one of your escapes, you got to wear this bulletproof vest to get to the airport from your apartment or wherever you're living. Possibly, you had the right idea. My first example thought was, why only 5? Aren't the other 145 people, aren't they worth the same as an American, as myself? Why shouldn't Zuhair Kanan, who's one of my lending officers, why shouldn't he have a bulletproof vest? So what do you do then? Okay? People are still trying to run roadblocks to get back home, from work at night. What do you do? What are you going to do with those bulletproof vests? What?
Give them away.
Give them away?
Depends on where you're staying.
No. No one, only my secretary knew I ever got those bulletproof vests. I took them and I put them in the bottom of a huge drawer in my desk, and they're probably still there. My attitude was, I want all 150. I don't want to make an example. I don't want to set an example that someone's life is worth less than my own. That was a real tough ethical decision, because someone in the other class asked me, well, what if an American got killed the next day? Would you feel bad about that? Of course I'd feel bad, but the chances of that were less than one of my foreign exchange traders trying to get up to Bet Mary in the mountains that evening. So I didn't, and there's a thing about leadership. If you set the right ethical standards, you're going to be a better leader, and you can guide that organization to a mission better than someone else if you have the correct principles and the behavior. Can you imagine walking into the bank, 5 Americans with bulletproof vests on? You stroll into the bank in the morning and the other employees don't have them? What are you saying? Okay, so that's one vignette. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I evacuated 9 times, sometimes with my family, sometimes they were overseas. They went back to Boston. So Thanksgiving 1975, I'm in Beirut. My wife and son, my son was born in Beirut. They're in Boston. I hadn't seen my wife in 6 weeks. I had to leave, evacuate again. Shooting was getting too intense in my neighborhood. Could never get down to the bank. So I flew to Paris. And I told my wife, we'll just get on a plane. We'll just have 4 or 5 days in Paris, and maybe I can get back to Beirut. Maybe I can't. Maybe I'll just go back to Boston and spend the holidays in December in Boston. So my wife arrives in Paris. I was operating through our Paris branch, trying to keep in touch with our employees. I wanted to make sure our employees were alive, okay, and encourage them, to be safe, stay in contact with our customers, don't take any risks. And also, I'd stay in contact with our high-level clients. I want to make sure they're still in business. I had a Saudi Arabian customer who happened to be in Paris, same time I was. So we say, let's have dinner together. He had never met my wife. So we go to a Parisian restaurant, fabulous meal. End of the evening, he says to my wife, Rebecca, meet me at Christian Dior tomorrow, 11 o'clock. I want to buy you a dress. And of course, this was going to be an original Christian Dior, probably $2,000 or $3,000 back 40 years ago. It's probably a $15,000 or $20,000 dress today. An original. What goes through your mind? What do you think?
Is it like kind of an under-table bribe?
Yep. Okay. What are you thinking? What would you think? I want to hear a woman giving up that dress. What are you going to do? Yeah.
You're wondering the motives of this. Like, why are you trying to give, like, my husband, like, if he's working with you, why would he give her?
Now, mind you, in the Middle East, this is very common. Customers give their bankers and bankers give their clients. Gifts are exchanged, okay? That's an accepted behavior, but again, you're with a very principled American corporation. What's going through your mind?
Does it, set a bad precedence if you deny, because it goes against their custom? Does it say obviously you don't care about it?
Okay, we're going to talk about this in the next hour. Okay, yeah, that's okay.
I was going to say he's a smart businessman because he knows that he can bribe you and all he wants, but your wife kind of has a little influence in your life and she can put some effort in there.
Okay, all right. Anything else? Okay. Well, we got into a big argument. I said, sorry, she's not going to meet you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. He said, why not? I said, because we will not accept a gift like that. No. Can he buy me a meal? Well, bankers and clients buy each other meals. That's okay. Nothing extraordinary. Not a $1,000 bottle of champagne, but a bottle of wine. I said, absolutely not. She will not meet you there. He said, you are insulting me. I am your customer. And this is a $500,000 account. Okay? I said, there's no way. He said, you are insulting me, my honor, my dignity. You've insulted me. I said, no. We do not accept gifts because for sure, he was in the construction business, and most of our business was not lending money. It was providing completion guarantees and bonds in Saudi Arabia. And we would sort of negotiate 0.3%. Guess what? He'd come back. 2 months later, $10 million, bond, completion guarantee. Oh, come on, Yanni, Chris, not 0.3%. Give me it at 2 ways. 0.25%. And you'd start to feel, well, in your mind, he bought this nice dress for my wife. Well, he's a nice guy, No, you don't do that. You can't compromise yourself. So what happened is that we had a huge argument. I never saw him again for the rest of my life. We communicated, and he would deal with my lending officers in Beirut, but I never saw him again personally. And when he came to Beirut or wherever I may have been, he would never call me again, because he took this as an insult, and I didn't feel it as an insult. And he knew he was trying to bribe. It was a bribe. There was no doubt about that in my own mind. Go ahead.
I think that this argument comes from the cultural differences, because I come from China, and I think actually China maybe have a very similar culture as the Middle East. Because if you do business in China, for example, if I buy a gift to you or to your family, it means that I want to have a more closer relationship with you as personal. So maybe next time we do business again, you will give me some benefit, or you can give me a benefit.
Yeah, but give you a benefit. But is it a benefit to my shareholder? No, you're working for your shareholder, okay? Your shareholders, okay.
Like for example, you have the chance, or you have the power to choose which, like who you want to work with.
I know. That's why I say I know we're going to get into this gray area soon, and I'm glad you raised that. We have a set of principles, okay, that we had at our bank, and most American corporations have those principles, and you have to live them no matter where you are. And I understand the nuances. And basically, I just told the Saudi, I said, we as American bankers do not accept these gifts. And he wouldn't accept that, okay? Okay, so that was a real life dilemma that I had. Okay, fast forward. All right, I'm going to go into Hong Kong now. Okay, so there's a thing in China called Chinese New Year. What's Chinese New Year? What happens at Chinese New Year? It's a big celebration. It happens because of the lunar calendar, right? It's usually the end of January, February. It's the biggest holiday in China. Everything closes down for 5 days or 6 days. People travel all over the country to be with family. It's like our Christmas, New Year celebration, but it's Chinese New Year. It celebrates the New Year. What year are we in? Tiger or rabbit? What are we this year? We're the rabbit, aren't we? Yeah, you're the rabbit, I think, yeah. Okay, so I'm general manager in Hong Kong. And my first Chinese New Year, I come home one evening about 5 days before Chinese New Year, and there are 2 television sets. Okay, 2 television sets show up. Next day, kumquat trees. Third day, a refrigerator. Then the day before Chinese New Year, I can't remember, 5 or 6 bottles of $7,000 to $1,000 bottle of cognac. Okay, XOs, right? Cognac, $1,000 bottles of cognac. What do you do? And you know who's giving them to you because they all put a nice little letter, you know, to all your customers. They give. So what do you do? What do you think? What's going through your mind?
Just a tradition.
It's just a tradition. Yep. So what happens? What are you thinking? Okay, so that client comes to you and says, I've got this sort of dicey loan. I'm not going to guarantee it personally, but extend it to my new business venture. So what do you accept a $1,000 bottle of cognac from, and he comes in 2 weeks later, and the Chinese will do that. They'll come into you 2 weeks later and say, come on, give me a deal now. So what's going to happen? What's in your mind? What should you do?
Don't you just follow proper business procedures? Because technically they just gave you a gift. You don't necessarily have to reciprocate.
I'm not talking about giving them a gift. What do I do with these? My whole living room is filled with gifts. What do I do?
Re-gift different gifts.
What?
Send them the refrigerator.
Send what?
Send them the refrigerator and then drink them.
Return the gifts?
No, you just re-gift them. Give them what someone else gave you and then drink them.
Yeah, but. Let's say, okay, one of the guys, famous Hong Kong Chinese, K.S. Lee Kaosheng. Did you ever hear of Lee Kaosheng? He's probably the wealthiest guy in Asia. Okay, K.S. Lee gives me a $1,000 bottle of cognac. K.S. Lee calls me up the next week, says something. Does he know that I've re-gifted his bottle of cognac?
I'm saying you should have sent him the refrigerator.
Send him. Give him a gift back.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. No. What do you think? All right.
Can't you just return the sender, or just? I mean, isn't there a cordial way to just
Well.
talk to people from different countries? Say,
Okay,
hey,
I'm going to ask. Okay, all right. That occurred to me. However, in the Chinese tradition, if you give me a gift and I give it back to you, what do you think? Are you insulted, or do you say that's okay? You're insulted. See, I didn't want to insult anyone. All right.
Then don't you just accept the gifts humbly and not because it's their tradition, and it's not necessarily that it's out of business, it's out of their celebration.
So I get to benefit. I get to enrich myself with all these material goods. You think so?
Well, you can't give it back, you can't accept it, then I guess all I can do is burn it, right?
No.
Couldn't you, I mean, full disclosure, just kind of go up and be like, or not go up, but explain to the person that you have to live by the most stringent code of conduct, and in this case, it's the one that your bank has, your firm has given you, and therefore you either can or cannot accept the gift, but then you cannot reciprocate it. Just let them know where you stand.
You're close. That's good. You're getting on the right track. Absolutely. Okay, I'll tell you what I did. But for getting me onto the right track, you're going to, you can't take, oh, you can't take, okay.
I'll be happy to accept our
Okay, no. Okay, so what I did was I consulted with my, my secretary, who was very wise. Her name was Teresa Mack. All the Hong Kong Chinese took first names. Just like you've got a, what's your first name now? Do you have a Western name, first name? No, you just go by your Chinese name. Okay, well, all the Hong Kong Chinese took Christian names, okay? Just easy for us to pronounce, I guess. So Teresa said, look, there'll be insult if you give it back, and so forth, and we noodled this around, and so we had a Chase club of 1,400 Chinese employees, had a Chase club, and at our Western Christmas, we would have a big ball. 2,000 people would show up. There wasn't a ballroom in Hong Kong large. I had to go through 2 ballrooms with televisions and everything to tell our employees, thank you for the year, and we'd celebrate. So what we did is we donated the gifts to the club, and then we had a lottery at the end of the year, and so the Chinese employees could maybe get that $1,000 bottle of cognac or the television or whatever. But the most important thing I did was I wrote a letter back to each of the givers of these gifts. And I said, it's our principle not to accept gifts of this size. But I understand your traditions, we're sensitive. So we have given the gifts to the entire Chase family. And they will benefit. And we thank you very much. Okay? That's the way we held that. So we did not insult Li Kaoxing, but he also knew I didn't receive it and he couldn't, that was not a bribe to me, and he cannot negotiate with me that one day I'm going to give him a favorable deal. Okay? So that's a real live situation that you could possibly face one day, okay, in your business careers. And particularly if you travel overseas. Very likely. And so what we had at the Chase Manhattan Bank, after many of these incidents, we set a policy that you could not accept a gift of more than $25. Okay? Whatever you thought the fair value was, you do not accept a gift of more than $25. And you either give it back or you donate it to a charity. And in this case, the Chase Club was a charity, or you donate, you could give it to Goodwill or, to someone, and they could sell it and profit, and not profit, but they could use it for good causes. So that's actually a policy. And the U.S. government has exactly the same threshold now. I think it's still $25. So therefore, anything, let's say, that an ambassador receives overseas, it's over $25, it becomes the property of the U.S. government. It's not his own personal property, okay? All right, so let me now go to another situation. A few years later, I'm running Chase's operations in London, okay? And in London, I had a commodities lending team that dealt with commodity trading companies that dealt in, all the commodities, gold, silver, wheat, oil traders and so forth. And he came into me one day and he said, look, there's this client in Switzerland, okay? And a lot of commodity trading firms are based in Switzerland. And why do you think they're in Switzerland? Why? Why Switzerland? Well, a lot of banks there, yeah.
Swiss government won't give out any information about their holders.
Absolutely, secrecy. And I'm not certain if Swiss have ever extradited anyone. Did Roman Polanski ever go to Switzerland? I don't recall. Maybe he did, and he wasn't extradited. Any event, the reason he came to me is that there was an individual. His name is Mark Rich. Does that ring a bell to anyone? Mark Rich. Okay, let me tell you about Mark Rich. In the 1970s, Mark Rich was a very wealthy, profitable commodity dealer out of New York City. And the IRS found that he did not pay taxes. So they were about to arraign him, and he fled to Switzerland to avoid paying taxes in the U.S. He just gave up his citizenship, and he started another company in Switzerland. Low-keyed, arm's length dealings with his companies, difficult to find out what percent ownership he actually had, but we uncovered it was a Mark Rich sort of sponsored company. He and a guy called Pinky Green, I think, was his partner. Anyway, they're in Switzerland. My commodities head comes to me and he says, look, I can guarantee you if we start a business relationship with this commodities company, trading company in Switzerland, I can guarantee you an extra $1 million on your bottom line. That's that much volume for us to do and the type of way we structure the deals. What goes through your mind? What do you think?
Too good to be true. It's that easy.
No, it's very believable. I mean, it's a very profitable business for a bank. Very profitable. I could believe we could make $1 million off of a new account like that. Now, what's going through your mind? Mark Rich, U.S., non-payment of taxes. Should you deal with them? What's your ethics here? What do you think?
I mean, I think he's not directly affecting, I think you have to act in your company's own interest. If it's a bad company, and you know it's not, if his commodities company is a bad company, and you know it's going to end up screwing you in the end.
No, it's perfect. It's a decent business risk. Okay, in terms of the way that, because in commodity financing, you're pretty well protected by contracts and so forth, collateral. But what else? What else? What goes through your mind? What should you be? What kind of a character you're dealing with here? What kind of a person is he?
Wouldn't you not want to be associated with someone who, especially being from an American company, being associated with someone who is in bad standing in the United States? Isn't that a support business?
Yep.
That also can't be.
Yep. Give her a ticket. Absolutely. Pass that down to her. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, there's a thing called character. There's a thing called character. Okay? So I said we cannot deal with that individual. We are an American corporation. He's not paid his U.S. taxes. If push came to shove, would he honor his commitments or his personal guarantee to us? Okay, what kind of character does he have? Okay, and I said, no, we're not going to do it. So my commodity head kept coming back to me day after day after day. I said, would you reconsider? Would you reconsider? Why do you think he was trying to get this deal done? What happens to bankers at the end of the year? Bonuses, absolutely. He said, gee whiz, here's $1 million to my bottom line, and at the end of the year, I can say that I've achieved my objectives, and it means maybe an extra $10,000, $20,000 to me personally. That's why he was trying to push it on me. So he was trying to enrich himself, you know, and look over his principles, even though he was an American working in Britain. So no, we never did business with him. Okay, so flash forward now another 10 years, you have President Clinton. What does a president do at the end of his term? Usually a week or two before he leaves the presidency. Pardons, okay. Okay, you're all 18, 19 years old, presumably. 18, 19, 20 years old, presumably. What happened 2 weeks before President Clinton left the presidency? He gave a pardon to Mark Rich, this guy in Switzerland. He said, you don't have to pay your taxes. You're a good guy. Come on back to the U.S. Why do you think Bill Clinton gave him a pardon? You're close. Okay. Mark Rich's wife made, I don't know, I think it was a $500,000, $1 million contribution to the Clinton Library. Now, who is that going to benefit? Huh? Who's going to benefit by receiving money for the Clinton Library? People of the city?
Where the library goes.
Little Rock, Arkansas? I don't think so. It was Bill Clinton. This is prestigious. It's his library. It has his name on it. He was gathering money, trying to find money to build all his library. Okay? So he gave Mark Rich. What kind of principles, what kind of ethics does that show of Bill Clinton? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What?
Pretty par for the course.
For Bill Clinton?
Yep.
Yep, I agree. Okay. What do you, does that disturb you? Yeah, okay. Well, that's actually what happened. Okay. Okay, that's actually what happened. Okay, so that's my Mark Rich story. Now, I've got 15 minutes. Let me tell you another story. Okay? I also lived in, did I mention I was in Australia and New Zealand? Okay. Now, in those countries, I found, in terms of behavior towards a set of rules accepted in our Western culture, because I'm talking a lot about Western culture, sort of that we have. It's different elsewhere in the world. But I found the New Zealanders extremely principled. If anyone ever tried to give you a gift, you would immediately be suspicious, and you would give it back. It was and so no one gave gifts to each other in New Zealand. And this is 40 years ago. It's all changed now. Australia was the same way. Okay, so when I was in Australia, there was a resource boom going on in Australia. We wanted to be the natural resources bank, do all the major large ticket project financings. And we were very successful. Okay, so there's an enormous ore body in northern South Australia called Roxby Downs. And one of the partners in that was the South Australian government. It's the state government of South Australia. And we were hired as the financial advisors to the state government on how best to finance and structure the project financing for this ore body. It was a small contract. It's only $50,000 over a year. But importantly, it gave us credentials, and it showed that we really had the expertise on the natural resources sector to be an investment bank in Australia. There's a famous character, a real rogue in Australia. His name is Alan Bond. He's now dead, so I can say it. No libel here, even though he's taping this. His name is Alan Bond. He's from Perth. He was an immigrant from the UK. He went out to Australia when he was 19 or 20. He was a sign painter. And he was a very clever character. He amassed a fortune. Okay? So Alan Bond wants to be part of this venture in South Australia. And he has to raise, let's say, a couple $100 million for his share of his equity plus project financing. So I'm with my colleague in Adelaide, Australia. We've had a very good day with the treasurer of South Australia, sort of strategizing how best to sort of structure this financing. And we're at a restaurant in Adelaide over our second bottle of red wine. And over in the corner is Alan Bond and two of his henchmen. And we had already had a banking relationship with Alan Bond. Okay, it wasn't the most pleasant one, but we still had a small relationship with him. So Alan Bond sees us over on the other side of the restaurant. He walks over, and he's drunk, as usual. And he says, "Hey, mate, I want you to give me $200 million. I want $200 million for my share, and, you know, and yours, and so what do you think at that time? He's trying to say, give me $200 million, I mean, with the proper analysis and everything else, but I'll need $200 million. I'll come to your bank, and we can make a lot of money off that, okay? But we have a $50,000 fee, and we are committed to advise one of the state government of Australia, and what do we have here, potentially? You're going to hear it all. You hear it all the time. Ah, who said that? All right, you're right. Absolutely. He's going to get a ticket. You said it. Loudest. Anyway, yes, it was a direct conflict of interest. We cannot deal on both sides of this deal. I could make a hell of a lot more money by lending the $200 million to Alan and getting fees upon fees and so forth, and I could enrich myself. My bonus would have been, I don't know, who knows what. But what do you tell Alan Bond? He's drunk, he's like this, pounding the table. What do you tell him? He knows that you're the financial advisor. He knows that. What do you tell him?
Talk about it tomorrow.
What do you think? What's going? You're thinking conflict of interest. That's right. Yep. What do you tell him? He's belligerent. Yep.
Well, I mean, you never want to work on the contract when you're drunk, because that's one reason that contracts are voided.
No. Actually, what you? Yeah, I know, but I'm no. Actually, what happened is that we just said, sorry, we already have an existing relationship. We're the financial advisors, and we believe we have a conflict of interest here, and I don't think we can help you. He was screaming and so forth. Sorry, we can't do that. And so consequently, what happened is that we did not deal with him. We turned him down, and he said to us, he said, if you do that, when I take over this project, I will fire you from your role as financial advisor, and you'll have nothing to ever do in this project again. We said, go ahead, try it. Well, he got his financing. Long and short of it is, he did fire us, but we had the honor. We had our ethical standards, and we met them. And that story got around Australia. Do you know how much business that generated for us in the long run? A tremendous amount, because they knew that we were a bank with certain degree of honesty and integrity. And I'm sure you hear these words all the time in your ethics course, but it's true. These things happen. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you another story about Alan Bond. I got 10 minutes. I got 2 more to tell you. Okay, so Alan Bond, okay, he's a multi-billionaire. He does go to jail eventually, by the way. And I can't recall what the charge was, but he did spend time in jail. Okay, so he's in Hong Kong. He's building a bond center. Okay, he calls it Alan Bond after himself. Bond center in central Hong Kong, and he wants to float his property company. And so I hadn't seen Alan Bond in 5 years, down in Hong Kong. And he's testing us out. He knows that we have a principle. Chase Manhattan, Australia, we will never deal with Alan Bond. It's just written in stone. Okay? Character, just like Mark Rich, he doesn't pass the sniff test on character for us. Okay. So he comes to Chase and he says, will you be an equity underwriter for our IPO in Hong Kong? Now, Hong Kong, Shanghai Bank, Standard and Chartered, Bank of East Asia, all the typical Chinese banks are all in there, okay? But he said, I'll give you guys a crack at this also, so we make $100,000 or something like that. So it helped my bonus a little bit at the end of the year. What do we say? No. Sorry, we'll pass on it. It's okay. And we told them, we have a principle. We just can't deal with you after what happened, 5 years ago. And I remembered it. A lot of young bankers came in since my time, okay, from the U.S. or from France. they don't even know who Alan Bond is. Oh, it's a good deal, let's do it. I said, no, you don't understand the history behind this deal. Okay, so we turned it down. So, the real irony of the story is, 3 nights later, the chairman of Hong Kong Land, good friend of mine, good tennis player, friend of mine, invites us to dinner. My wife and I go to dinner, and guess who's at dinner? Alan Bond is there. Hi, Alan, good to see you. And all that stuff goes on. So my wife has to sit next to Alan Bond. She had heard about him for 10 years, had never met him, found him absolutely charming. Absolutely charming. Thought, well, what kind of a guy is he? I mean, he's so nice. He has great stories. You know, he's got sophisticated sort of taste and everything else. Nicely dressed. But guess who I sat next to? Alan Bond's mistress. Nice lady from Sydney, Australia. He flies all around the world with her. His wife, Red, is back in Perth, Australia. So, I mean, that's the kind of character. I mean, blatantly has his mistress with him. And it's you know, anyway, Red finds out, you know, the marriage is destroyed. He goes to jail later on and so forth. But, you know, that's the kind of characters you may deal with, okay? And go with your instincts, you know. If something doesn't smell right and there's a lack of character, there's a reason for it. And it'll come back and haunt you one day, maybe the second time around or the third time around. It's a true story. I got 5 more minutes. Let me tell you what I'm doing now since you haven't seen it. I'm retired, but I'm on a couple boards of directors in Bulgaria. And you talk about corruption and bribery and vote buying. It is unbelievable what happens in Bulgaria. Now, this is part of the you know, they're making some improvements over the last 20 years, but it's part of the old Soviet bloc of Eastern Europe and so forth. There have been over 20 assassinations of business people and journalists and politicians in Bulgaria in the last 20 years. Over 20, I don't know, 23, 24. One actually occurred while I was there. Fortunately, I was about 5 blocks away. I didn't hear the gunfire that day. But there has not been one conviction of anyone yet. They've arrested someone and they let them go. But I mean, no one's been convicted and put in jail yet. So you can sort of sense what the business climate is like and the ethical climate. They're trying to make inroads. But I tell you, this is one of the most fascinating in terms of ethics that I've ever seen in my life. And we have a major foundation in Bulgaria, and I'm looking after the rule of law aspects to look at anti-corruption and so forth. It is really difficult because it's not your generation. Your generation in Bulgaria and Eastern Europe gets it. It's my generation that doesn't get it, because that's the way they grew up. And it's going to be really tough. But anyway, it does exist, and you have to have the understanding of the cultural nuances and the gray areas and so forth. But, you know, as we mentioned before, stick to your principles. And I think what the coursework that you're doing now, I think is excellent. And you're going to have case studies, hopefully, and debates among yourselves, because there's always a gray area out there. You know, sometimes it's not cut and dry. It's not black and white. You have to sort of think it through a little bit. And ask people, you know, if you ever get if you're by yourself and you're faced with a judgment, please go to a colleague, go to a mentor or someone and say, what do you think the right thing to do is here? It's not always clear cut. Do you have any questions at all? Anything? You want to raise anything? Anything about your business, careers, anything? Yep.
So when you sit next to these people at the table who you know are getting bribed and things like that, as you're saying, how do you, like, just, what do you do when you just sit there knowing that this is going on around you? Do you just ignore it and stick to your ethics, or do you just,
You have to speak up. You have to speak up. You have to speak up and say, you know, you may not appreciate this. It may be acceptable in Saudi Arabia, but where I come from and what's expected of our corporation and ourselves this is not the behavior that we engage in. You have to be very honest. And, you know, and they won't be surprised. In fact, they might admire you a little bit more. You know, they might admire you a little bit more. They will not be surprised. I mean, I'm sure it's in your history, business history and case studies about the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Did you ever hear of that? Okay, Google Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. I could spend an hour on that, but we're almost out of time. That is a piece of legislation that was passed in the 1970s, and that really, because American businesses were, you know, going global. We were the pioneers in the 1960s, 50 years ago, starting to go overseas for the first time, and establishing real beachheads in countries, not just the obvious countries, but I mean real developmental countries. And so there were some real dilemmas out there. And so this was passed, I think, 74, 75. Take a look at it. There's been some real controversy as to whether or not Americans are held at a higher standard in the world than the French or the Italians or the Germans. Look what's going on in Iran today. Okay? We don't have any businesses in Iran today. You know, we were massive in Iran. I also lived in Iran for 2.5 years. Who do you think's trading there? China, for sure. I mean, China will deal with anyone, let's face it. They're buying up Africa right now. They don't care, I mean, with respect, human rights as to what's going on in Africa today. But in any respect, but look at what the Italians and the French and the Germans have been doing with Iran. They don't care. They'll deal through subsidiaries and subsidiaries, do business. And anytime we see an American company dealing in Iran, guess what we do? We chastise them and they pull out. We are, I mean, some reason we are held to a higher standard. So it's not a surprise if you go to someone and you're having this conversation and say, sorry, I just can't do this. It's not our business practice. Anything else? Yep.
Do you find that the ethical standards that you come into contact with in foreign countries drive direct correlation to the political climate?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look at Berlusconi in Italy today. You know what's going on in Italy? He hasn't, you know, he's got about 10 charges against him. Okay, he's prime minister. They can't find a court to take it yet, but he's going to get caught. Yeah, I mean, Berlusconi has, you know, got dubious ethical behavior. Sure, absolutely. Leadership sets a standard in a corporation. You know, if you're ever, you know, general manager or heading up a team or whatever in your business career, you're going to set the ethical standards for that team. And if you do something a little bit astray, they'll follow your suit too, for sure. And that's a principle of leadership. So, anything else? Yeah.
How do you deal with the language barrier in all these countries? Do you usually have translators? Or?
Well, yeah, certainly in China. When I first went to China in 1980, first time, right after the Cultural Revolution, very few Chinese spoke English. Everything was translators. Hong Kong, English is a second language. Everyone's fluent. Iran, 50-50. Lebanon, the great thing about the Lebanese, they're fluent in 3 languages, and they'll use all 3 languages in the same sentence, virtually, or paragraph. Arabic, French, and English. And of course, when I was in London, New Zealand, Australia, I really didn't need any, you know. But I do speak a couple of languages outside of English, but not necessary. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much. Enjoy it.